Before I made this video, I wanted to wait and see if all of the capital ships losing their Tier 1 medical beds was a design decision by SIG or just a bug, because with them it's very hard to tell because they don't really communicate anything very well. I also wanted to see what people in my community thought about this, whether it was a good or a bad change, and here are the poll results on screen. As you can see, it's pretty close to 50-50. I am in the camp of I do not think that any capital ship should have lost its Tier 1 medical bed. And from reading all the comments that people posted about this, it seems that people feel like they had to in order for the Apollo to have a purpose in a game, because I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's the only Tier 1 medical bed in the game. Others have said that they did this to encourage sales of the Apollo. I do not often believe in that. I think that a lot of things that SIG does is mostly either knee-jerk or an overreaction to something. Generally, it's typically a change I think they make without really understanding the game that they work on. Take a look at the Drake Corsair nerf, for example. Just one of many very silly design changes that they made and they walked back on. And a lot of this stuff with the med beds and all that, I think comes down to just how poorly the entire medical bed concept is in Star Citizen. Tier 1, 2, and 3, all this stuff, it's overly complicated and it, quite frankly, doesn't need to be. It's actually so complicated that it even confused Jared and some guy he was talking to on SCL. Here, listen to this.
It's technically 6 modules, but it's 2. It's the left and right with a tier 1 bed, a left and right with the tier 2 with 2 tier 2 beds, and a left and right with 3 tier 3 beds.
Yeah.
So it is technically.
I still get confused by the tiers. It's the wrong way around in my head.
It is. We do everything in Star Citizen is generally tier 1 is your starting, and then you go up. And tier 2 is more than tier 1, and tier 3 is more than tier 1. With the Apollo, because of whatever decision we made back in 2018 or whatnot, I think it matches actual first responder injury stuff. I'm not sure. I don't remember.
Oh, I guess that makes sense then.
But it's inverse. So the Apollo is the only one that's inverse, where tier 1 med beds are the best of the med beds, and then tier 2 are the medium, and then tier 3 are the lesser ones. And that is confusing a lot of people. We're like John said.
So if the guys working on Star Citizen cannot even remember or figure out what tiers the med beds are, I think it is perfectly reasonable for us as players to be equally, if not more, confused. Me personally, if I had my way, I would just make the medical beds tier 1, 2, and 3, and have 1 be the worst and 3 be the best. But let's actually talk about this change here, and I'm going to give you my feedback on it and what my opinion is. It should probably come as no surprise to you that I am against the capital ships losing their tier 1 medical beds. This is not because I own these capital ships, I also own the Apollo, but it's because of how I view the medical beds and their role in the game. As has been pointed out to me by others in comments, the medical system in Star Citizen is very bad. I've done videos about this. But really, what their purpose is, and this is the most important purpose that they have, is to function as a respawn point. A capital ship should, in theory, be a mobile base, something that you operate out of and that you run, events and things out of for your organization. It would only make sense for this mobile base to have the absolute best medical bed available. That is not to say that the Apollo should lose its tier 1 medical bed, not at all, but rather that it should be shared with capital ships as well. Honestly, again, if we didn't have this bizarre medical bed distinction, we really wouldn't be having this conversation. A medical bed would simply be a medical bed, and the ship it's attached to would have its own positives and negatives, along with having the convenience or tactical option of a medical bed with it. Some people have raised the concern that if the capital ships did not lose their tier 1 medical beds, that the Apollo would have no purpose. Well, if that's the case, I would say that no other ship with a medical bed now other than the Apollo has a purpose, because the Apollo is, quite frankly, the absolute best at what it does, which again is a problem presented to us by having the tiered medical bed system. If I had to have a medical bed tier system, I would simply have 2 tiers. I would have a tier that players build on planets, so FOBs and outposts and everything else. Those would be your most powerful medical beds and respawns or medical facilities that players would run and staff. Think of your, a mobile doctor, field hospital, FOB, whatever you want to call it. And then the other type of medical bed I would have would simply be a mobile one. This would be universal across all ships that have a medical bed. From the Ursa all the way up to the Idris, The medical beds would simply be the same, but the chassis that they are on and the tactical options that chassis gives you would be what's different. Because right now, the only real difference with the medical beds is the respawn range. Tier 1, which is the best, and currently what the Apollo has, can act as a system-wide respawn point. Well, then I would ask you this. What is an Apollo going to do with a system-wide respawn point? Let's say you're on Area 18 and some other guy dies on Microtech and he respawns on your Apollo. Now what? How does he get off of your Apollo? What do you do with him? Do you drive him somewhere? Do you take him back to his ship? Do you take him to a station? What do you do? Are you a medic at this point? Are you a doctor? Or are you a taxi driver? What are you doing? These are the questions I ask because the Star Citizen medical system makes no sense. That's why I always talk about the respawns. A player respawning on a ship with no way to get another ship of his own means nothing. And in Star Citizen, you have to have a ship to do everything and anything. It's how you play the game. So what does it matter when you respawn at a mobile point when you have no way to leave that mobile point? This is why I have always advocated for the capital ships being that mobile base, as well as having the capital ships possess the ability to claim or respawn, or whatever term you want to use, a ship. Now, don't focus on the specifics here. Just understand the concept, because we're talking about the concept of a ship spawning another ship. This is the same concept that you think would apply to a base, a mobile base that you're supposedly going to be able to build in the future, right? So you build a respawn facility on a planet, and on that respawn facility is also a way to pull a ship to get off that planet, I would assume, right? You would think this is what would make sense from a gameplay point of view. You would, I'm sure, make this require a resource of some sort, something that you would use to fabricate the ship, instead of using the word claim. Somewhat similar to Medgel, but except for respawning a ship. The next logical step in this thought process is then, well, what do we do about infantry-focused players or ground combat-focused players? What do they do without equipment? Because to them, they don't just need a ship, they need equipment. Well, how do we get them their equipment? Are these ships expected to bring every single piece of gear? Or would something like, say, again, an abstract resource that manufactures the gear and lets them claim gear for a cost that the ship has to refill, would that not make more sense? These are all concepts. They're not specifics. And believe it or not, this is what ties into the Apollo and the medbed and the Capitals losing their medbed. Because simply respawning in Star Citizen is not enough. There's another layer to respawning. It's why stations are so popular. Stations have everything you need to continue the game. However, mobile spawn points don't have anything that you need in order to continue the game, unless you're respawning on your own ship and you bring your own stuff. But what about everybody else? What about if you're trying to just pick up strangers, or you're trying to help your organization, or you're just trying to do whatever it may be? Use your imagination. How do you get the person respawning on your ship or your medical facility to continue the game? That is how this ties in to the capital ships losing their medbeds, because it is the only ship in the game, in theory, that is also, in theory, equipped to potentially allow a player to continue the game. The next logical step to a player respawning on your ship is, how the hell do you get them off of your ship? Well, they need their own ship, they need their own equipment. Right now, Capitals are the only thing that have, again, in theory, the ability to do that. So that's how I think about things. I always look at it from a multi-layered approach. Star Citizen, a lot of these concepts, and people always bring it up. They say, oh, well, this is meant to be the best damn space sim ever, and all that crap. Listen, guys. These are concepts that are well over a decade old now. These are concepts that were thought of before Star Citizen added infantry combat to the game. And I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. The moment they added infantry, they have shifted from space sim to combined arms MMO FPS. And again, need I remind you, this is straight from the mouth of people working on the game. And if this game does not start being developed like an MMO FPS game, it will not succeed in being a space sim, nor will it exceed in being an MMO FPS. The MMO FPS part of the game is the most nuanced part of the game that is being developed. There are plenty of other space sim games to get inspirations and ideas from, and quite frankly, the space sim thing it's very easy to develop that. But developing a very well thought out and functioning MMO FPS is very hard, because you can't just look at a session-based, non-scaling shooter game for inspiration on systems and design. And you only really have 3 other games to look at for ideas and inspiration and lessons that you can learn from. That's World War II Online, Planetside 1, and Planetside 2. Those are the only 3 MMO FPS games ever made. Star Citizen will be the 4th. Think about that. It is still relatively uncharted gaming territory, and I am seeing a lot of these mistakes being made and a lot of things being put in the game without any thought or lessons learned from the failures of these 3 games that I mentioned. SIG may or may not be aware of that. And everything I just said, that all ties into the capital ship and Apollo medbed changes, believe it or not. Anyway, thank you for watching and or listening.